Hi, John.
Andrew, would you like to open the meeting?
Sure. So, good evening, everybody, here and away and online. Welcome to the Shelburne Select Board's meeting of January 8th, 2024. It's being 5:30. We'll begin with a call to order and acceptance of the meeting minutes of December 18, 2023. Rick, did you have a chance to review those?
Yes, sir. I found two things, one that would clarify facts and one that's just a typo. On the second page, first paragraph, last sentence. Josh Simpson then mentioned that he and his partners had one thought, had once, ONCE, previously, obviously. And then in the next paragraph below, at 6 o'clock, right about in the middle, Diana agreed to resign from the RE committee. Just add another C to Rec committee, and everything else was good as far as I could see.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's good. That may become a moot point shortly, but we'll see. And you said there was a question of factual question there?
Yeah, the word one compared to the word once. And
yeah, I think that's just a typo. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But read a month from now or 2 months from now, we'll all forget.
Right. So is there a motion to accept as corrected for typos?
So moved.
All right, and I will second that. And all in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew's aye, and the motion carries and the minutes are accepted. And we are on to department liaison reports. Rick.
As I mentioned last meeting, the Veterans Center hadn't, or the Veteran Services Group had not met since last summer, and they're meeting tomorrow evening. And I will be at that and have more budget-wise. They're supposed to be settling tomorrow evening. Town Hall, I met with the collector, treasurer, and Angel and Karen from the Assessors Department, trying to figure out how the 3% CPA fund calculations were done. Because as I got my tax bill, I just couldn't figure out the breakout to it. I said, how did they get this number? Not that I was complaining about it, I just wanted to learn. And between Angel and Karen, they finally figured out the formula, which is not very straightforward, I must say. So if a person comes to Town Hall and is questioning it, Karen, Angel, and I all have it written down, the math formula to get there. But it came out right to the penny once you figured out how it was done. And the confusion being that the 3% was not on your valuation, but on your tax based on the tax rate. So there's like 4 steps to get there. I thought that was interesting. Police department, they've been working.
Rick, we did go over the formula a number of times in the public meetings that led up to this. So there are PowerPoints that are available that have that formula written down in it and stuff like that.
Wow, good. Yeah, Angel and Karen had no idea how it was done.
Yeah.
So
well, they should be on the website too.
I haven't seen it, but perhaps. Police department, the chief's been working on the state and federal year-end reports. Only interesting note so far, just mentioned as an aside, was they've had over 6,000 calls answered in January through November. They're waiting on December, and at which point he'll complete and have year-end reports, possibly for our next meeting. And the new cruiser has been through the shop for the final application of badging and so on, and should be in service anytime. And that's all I have.
Great. The only small notes I have are that the Pratt Library Committee is meeting this coming Thursday. So I'll have more on that at the next meeting. And that is the only committee that I'm a liaison to. I did have a nice informal tour of the Cowell Gym basement with Diana Hardina this afternoon. She passed me in the street and wanted me to take a look at the new ping pong room. And so there are some things we can talk about at the Cowell Gym when we get to that item. But anyway, and I guess we'll have to wait on the highway department unless anybody has any information on that. Terry, do you have more in the departmental section?
No, I don't. Thank you. And
Okay.
Bob will not be joining us this evening. He's not well.
Okay. Sorry to hear that. So we are now at 5:36 and our appointment's not till 6 o'clock. So I guess we will have to go down through the rest of our business for a little while and see if we can return to our appointees or our appointment when closer to the time. Terry, is there more on the proposed solar array? I think we can skip that because we're going to be talking about that during our appointment. Is there
Yes.
more on the flag policy?
I had agreed to bring the flag policy back to the board this meeting with the language change that exempted the marquee boards from the policy. I think you've each had an opportunity to review it, and it's just a matter of voting to adopt the language as presented.
Yeah, I saw it. I was fine with the change that you made. Rick, do you have any comments on that?
So moved.
So the flag policy as amended has been moved. I will second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and the motion carries. All right, we have a new flag policy. The Hills Cemetery Commission is requesting to appoint Lonnie York. Is that correctly spelled? That's not Lori York, is it?
No, her name is Lonnie.
Oh, okay. So that is a different person. I had thought that was Lori with a typo, but
No.
okay. Great. Rick, have you had a chance to review that request?
I have. I found it interesting also. I said, I didn't even know we had such a committee until I went back and looked at the appointments that are done after the town meeting, because I had searched the entire town website and couldn't find a page or who was on it and all of that information. So I'd like to see maybe that get snuck in at some point. But yeah, the last meeting, according to what's been on, what I could find on the website, was back in May of 2019. So I think getting some more up-to-date information on the site might be helpful. And I don't know if Joe would take care of that or whoever the chairman is at this point of the three people on it. But no, I have no problem with the recommendation. I did have a question on the wording of that first, or the one sentence that Joe wrote. Recommendation from the current Hill Cemetery Commission to become a member of Cemetery Commissioner. Don't think that's English. I'm trying to figure out, would she be a commissioner? Or did he mean as a member of the Cemetery Commission? I'm
A member of the Cemetery Commissioner.
Of the Cemetery Commissioner, okay.
I'm sorry, Cemetery Commission.
Okay. That's what I was guessing, but
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if they were all called commissioners or what, but so I have no concerns here whatsoever in making the appointment.
Great. Okay. And just my own note on that, Rick, is I think that if you serve on a commission, you can be called a commissioner. I serve on the Sewer Commission, and I believe we are referred to as commissioners. or members of the sewer commission. So I think those are relatively interchangeable.
Right.
So the motion has been made to appoint Lonnie York.
Yes.
Okay, and I will second that. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, we'll bring to a vote. All in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and the motion carries. And just as a question there, Terry, I'm fairly certain that we have discussed and even appropriated funding for various kinds of repair and restoration work at the Hill Cemetery over the last 3 years.
Yes.
So that's an active group, Rick, that's been doing stuff to preserve the Hill Cemetery. Though I agree with you, I think that they should be represented on our website. Is there a way we can get them to do that, Terry?
I can certainly speak to Joe. I believe the town has 3 or 4 town-owned cemeteries. I believe Lonnie York is already representative on 2 of those cemetery boards. So maybe they could create a page, because quite often I get questions about Arms Cemetery, and that's not town-owned. But
Right.
maybe there could be an information page on town cemeteries that Joe could put together and who to contact.
That would be great. But I would also think that we should have every board or commission or committee that is, representing the town should be on our website. Just so that people know what the town's representatives are,
Yes.
I agree. That's why I mentioned it. There's
Yeah.
nowhere on the site, there's no page. There's not even an old page that isn't currently linked. I searched cemetery or I think just cemetery commission, and I got a link that brought me to minutes from old select board meetings where it was discussed, but couldn't find any information on it. So they could use a page for sure.
Good. Okay, so thank you for that, Terry. So on to the new business B, Cowell Gym oil tank replacement proposals. We have a proposal from the Maple Farm Group and one from Sandry. Rick, have you had a chance to review those?
I have. What I haven't had, and maybe John or perhaps you, Andrew, have more information. The communications I saw mentioned that the legs of the current oil tanks were starting to look a little shaky, and that it might behoove us to take those 2 out and put in one larger one for the interim period, because the discussion was already held previously about taking the oil burner out completely after the heat pumps have proven themselves effective. So it seems like 4,500 or $6,000 to change oil tanks that we may use for a year. I don't know that. Is it ready to fall over? If it is, it should have been an emergency item already, I would guess. But so I'm feeling in a vacuum a little bit there about the information of how bad it is and how soon would we be getting rid of them.
Terry, do you have more light to shed on those items?
Yes, and John can chime in. I personally would always want a backup heating system in the building unless we have a generator or something, because if the mini splits go, the boiler is designed to kick on to prevent freezing. I think one, if not both of the tanks are on 3 legs at the moment, and the tanks are full. So although I'm going to recommend that we postpone a vote on this until our next meeting when I have at least one more quote, I do think it's imperative that we replace the 2 tanks with one and keep fuel on site. The fuel's paid for until we decide what we're going to do in the future for a backup heating system. But John can certainly weigh in on this as well.
John, do you have more on that?
I think we just.
Well, Yeah, so, hi. What I would recommend, we are supposed to theoretically turn off the oil completely at some point in time. But I agree with Terry that I think having a backup storage in case something does happen to the heat pumps would be practical. I also think that instead of putting a similar tank that's in now, that perhaps spending slightly more for one Roth tank, which is a plastic tank enclosed in aluminum that is going to last much longer. It's not subject to rust like the current tanks that you see in most places. I put one into my house 25 years ago and it doesn't show any sign of rust or decomposition. So they're slightly more expensive than the standard tank, but I think one 275-gallon tank would be sufficient if if the heat pump system does go down and it needs a repair. That would be a priority anyways, and it should be back online fairly quickly after that. Just up to date as far as the system is working, it's doing extremely well. I've talked to several people who are using the gym. They're extremely happy with the temperature. It's set at 60. Because there's constantly refrigerant flowing through the systems, even though it may not be extracted intentionally, when it's in a slow mode or fan mode, it's actually stealing a little bit of the heat of the refrigerant that's actually running through the VRF, variable frequency drives. So the basement is actually running much warmer than I anticipated. And I've actually done an experiment this past week where I actually turned off the basement and it's still maintaining a 60-degree temperature. That's four heads in the basement. So I think from that perspective, keeping a backup for this year at least would be worth it. And it's probably going to be, instead of $800 a piece or $1,200 a piece, it might be $1,600 for one. But again, that
for
could
one
just be
what?
for one Roth line tank,
Okay,
Roth storage tank, and that's the specific brand name, Roth.
How did
And it could be transferred to another location if in fact we decide to remove the system in the future.
How did
couple
we
of
come
questions.
by these?
Sorry,
How
was
did we
that you,
come by
Rick?
the quotes? Yes, I'm sorry. How did we come by the quotes?
Mark Shippey obtained the one from Maple Row Farm, and I reached out to Sandry, and Mark met them at Cowell Gym for that quote.
And they both recommended the 330-gallon.
Yes.
So what would we do to get new numbers for, I guess, just reach out to them again and have them quote a Roth tank if we felt that was prudent?
Yes, I would definitely have them provide a second quote. Sandry, anyway. The second proposer isn't properly licensed to do this kind of work. So I wouldn't consider their proposal at this point. So I'm
Okay.
seeking another one.
Great.
Couple of questions. John, if Terry is suggesting that a backup system would be a good idea, but you're suggesting that we might turn off the backup after a year, explain why we would not want to have a backup system.
If the HVAC system does go down, since it's the primary heating system, it would become a priority to be fixed quickly. And the building seems to be holding temperature okay right now. So with the energy efficiency measures that were done years ago, when we first became a green community grant community, that's redundant. It would be probably okay to be able to go 24 to 72 hours without having an oil coming on. That's speculative on my part. So again, I don't have a very particularly strong opinion about completely turning it off, but in our Green Communities grant, the statement was that it would be removed theoretically upon installation of the HVAC system. So we're walking a bit of a thin line when it comes to keeping that system online. But again, these newer systems that we installed theoretically are able to produce heat at 20 below zero. So in the older days being less 5 years ago, it was the recommendation to keep your heating system as a backup. But these new systems are so effective at removing heat at lower temperatures that I don't think it would be necessary.
I know at town hall, we've kept the furnace as a backup and the arms
Yes.
library.
Yep.
And we have used both
Yep.
when we've lost power at town hall.
Yes. But theoretically, if you lose power at town hall, you're not going to have access to the boiler or the furnace, depending upon what it is, because it needs electricity to run.
Yeah,
And you are either of them using a could a portable generator kind of kick in and fire up the backup system at any of these buildings?
Yes.
at town hall, we're wired for a backup generator to be plugged in.
Uh-huh. So in theory, that could still work for a power outage kind of situation. And
Yes,
where
at Cowell, it's the same thing, although for Cowell, the demand on those compressors is pretty high, so you probably need a bigger system of generator than you would need at a town hall just to run a boiler.
uh-huh. Yeah. Well, it just strikes to me that, I mean, I agree with you in the normal operation. If you have an outage, I mean, if you have your mini split go down, you could get somebody to come in and fix it and get it back up again. But if you're thinking about the Cowell Gym as an emergency shelter site and you have a large, sustained power outage in the region, then, you might want that, backup system to be operable,
I agree, but I think the other thing to consider is that is my understanding that several of the sections of the boiler are cracked, and that in fact that boiler was supposed to be replaced by a $50,000 set aside that the select board voted on several years ago. So that would be my concern from this perspective, is how long will that even last? It's a 40 or 50-year-old boiler that's down there.
So to
that
have
would-
an effective oil backup, we would have to actually replace the boiler then.
You could put in a much smaller boiler for sure, if that was the direction you wanted to go.
Yeah. Well, more grist for the mill there. It sounds like we'll get some quotes and we can keep talking about this at the next meeting.
While we're on the subject of Cowell Gym, I wanted John to speak briefly about the wire cages that he got an estimate for the heat pump units.
Oh, sure. As you know, in the gym, there are 8 heads that provide the heat. I believe they're 24,000 or 2-ton system heads. We've had an experience where at least one of the vanes on one of the heads appears to have been hit by some type of an object. We have no evidence or proof that actually happened, but the Recreation Committee did suggest that we put up cages around the heads to prevent damage from flying objects. I have tried to contact 3 different installers. I said I would be willing to track that down. Of the 3, I've only had one who actually responded and has responded quite quickly and has been very attentive. And he is suggesting that between $400 and $500 per cage, we could have them wrapped within if we decide to go with him, it costs approximately $4,000 at the high end. We do have some money left over from the original set aside that we set aside for the heat pump water heater. But we would still be slightly short if we needed to go down that road or would like to go down that road. I would recommend we go down that road. So I would say right now we have $400 to $500 per cage, lightweight metal. The contractor actually was there this morning at 8:30. I met him. We walked around the gym. He felt very confident that he may be able to do it very quickly once it's designed. They would have to be anchored into the wall, and then it's simply the cage could be removed for maintenance and cleaning.
Thanks for that. John, question about the heat pump water heater. If we don't have showers in the gym, what do we need hot water for?
Maintenance,
Bathrooms.
bathrooms, cleaning, making, using hot water to mop the floors, that type stuff.
Okay, and I'm just wondering,
Custodial type activities.
so pretty small amount of hot water then.
Correct. That's why we took out the electric hot water tank and put in a heat pump water heater.
Okay. But a heat pump water heater is not cheap, right? Those are
The
significant.
whole thing was installed for $3,100.
Oh, so we have a heat pump hot water heater.
We put it in already. It's in and been running for 2 months.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry, the way you were talking, it sounded like you wanted to reserve some of the set aside money
No,
to
the
put.
set aside money left after the installation of the heat pump water heater will not cover the entire cost of putting in baskets around.
Oh, so how much
cages
is
around.
left?
I think Terry has that number, but I think it was around $4,000.
Yes.
Oh,
So we're not far from the
so it
remaining
comes
balance.
pretty close then.
Yeah, we could take it
Yes.
from the Cowell Gym maintenance account, the balance.
Okay. And do we want to go forward in that direction tonight, or do you want to wait on that? Is there more to consider there, or quotes to get? What's the status of the cage?
Well, from my perspective, I left messages on each of the other contractors. This gentleman has been very proactive in replying to me. And very, what am I trying to say? Timely. I think that at this point, if you want me to continue to track down other quotes, I'm willing to do that. But if we can have these in place fairly quickly, I would suggest that we move forward and tell this gentleman to go ahead and manufacture the cages.
Well, Terry, just in terms of guidance on that, my sense is if it's 4,000, don't we need at least a few quotes to stay within MGL?
If you've made attempts and they're unresponsive, as long as you note who you contacted and the fact that they didn't respond, you're covered if it's under 10,000.
Okay, and have we made those efforts yet? Or we just
John has.
I have,
Yes.
it's only been one call to each of the other 2 contractors, but I have a note as to the time and date and left message type notes. for
Okay.
those.
Rick, do you have thoughts on this subject?
I think it's highly prudent to cover them up. They're expensive units, and for $500 a cage, that's seems very prudent, because the discussion about them happened right off the get-go with concerns of the balls flying. And if everybody's comfortable with moving forward and voting to proceed with this person that's been responsive, I'm comfortable with it as well.
All right, you've expressed my thoughts exactly. Do you want to move in that direction?
I would move that we authorize John to contact the individual who appears willing and anxious to get this done on a timely manner to proceed and manufacture and install the cages for the protection of the units at Cowell Gym.
Okay, and that we'll use the remainder of the Green Communities money and supplement with, what was the other source, Terry?
It's actually $10,000 the board allocated from ARPA, of which we have approximately $4,000 left. So it would be a combination of that balance that was set aside specifically for the heat pump project.
Yeah,
And the balance would be taken from Cowell Gym maintenance.
okay, so moved or so seconded. I just wanted to get that detail in there so that we know where we're covering this from. Good. Any further discussion on that?
None.
Hearing none, we'll bring it to a vote. All in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and the motion carries.
Thank you. I'll get hold of him tomorrow.
All right.
Thanks for all you're doing there, John.
My pleasure.
Great, thank you. And we are now at 6 o'clock, so we can go back to our appointment, and the Energy Committee and John Walsh are joining us to talk about the solar array at the pole barn. Who would like to begin? Terry, do you have any sort of opening words you want to make about the RFP and all that stuff, or are we just gonna launch right in?
No opening words. I would like to get the RFP process started, and it would be great to do it in a manner where proposers submit to the town the most advantageous proposal based on perhaps a coordinated site visit. And we could incorporate some of the things that you mentioned as well, if the group feels they're worthy of adding to the RFP.
Okay. Energy Committee and John Walsh. Have you all had a chance to think about this subject and have thoughts to share? Tom.
Yeah, I made a phone call to several departments at Eversource to find out more about what the capacity is for solar on the pole barn, and what the hosting capacity is that Eversource has to offer. And after being bounced from one department to another, I finally was put in contact with Matt Sikovich. And he is he's associated with electrical connections in the area. Matt very strongly, well, first of all, that site has the capacity for up to 200 kilowatts of solar power, not the pole barn, mind you, but the substation that delivers power to that area has a 0.2 megawatt capacity. It is the Cumberland substation 22B. Matt strongly recommended that we try to get a company that is fully aware of all the opportunities for incentive funding to go along with the project, and to think beyond just the pole barn and be thinking in terms of what other places in the town of Shelburne solar can and should be installed. Now, this, of course, expands the whole project to a different scale from just looking at the pole barn. And I'm certainly not in a position to be, saying, yeah, this is the way we have to go. But it is something that we should consider. And Matt said that he would be willing to come and talk to the select board at some time. I reached out to him this morning to see if he could make it to this meeting, and he could not. But basically, he's saying get the most knowledgeable company you can to be involved with not only this pole barn project, but what other opportunities there are in the town.
Thanks for that Yeah, you've kind of raised two different issues there, because the 200 kilowatt capacity at that site would not necessarily apply if we identified a site that was not served by that line. It would have a different kilowatt capacity, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
So those are two different issues. One is just the kilowatt capacity there at the pole barn,
Yeah.
of which we would be using roughly a tenth of that amount.
Mhm.
27 to 28 kilowatts is what I've been told would fit on the pole barn roof.
Yeah.
And so 200 kilowatts gives us plenty of room to work with there. But the
Yeah.
other issue that
Sorry, go ahead.
the other issue that he mentions of wanting to look at wider opportunities for solar is certainly a good conversation to have, but we're really talking right now about a project that the voters voted money for, which is roughly commensurate with what we can do at the pole barn. So my recommendation is we stick with that, since that's what we have funding to do right now, and that the Energy Committee should certainly be looking at those wider opportunities, and perhaps bringing to us other proposals that we might look at how to fund with grant funding or other funding to expand our solar footprint with.
Yeah, I totally agree with Andrew. I understand what you're saying about what money is available right now for this particular project. And certainly it falls within the area of interest of the Energy Committee to be looking further into solar potential.
Good. John and Energy Committee, have you all had a chance to review the little memo that I put together with some of the issues that I raised? Did any of you have thoughts on those? Do you want to run through them? I see Jeff raising his hand. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. Okay, thanks. Yeah, Andrew, actually, I like your comments a lot. And one thing I wanted to add while we're on the subject is that I was in a conversation with Greenfield Solar, and they said that there's going to be a big installation of solar going on that same line at the meditation center up the road is putting in a huge installation. So that may actually take up a lot of that excess solar that that Tom has talked about. I don't know how much they're shooting, but it's a big chunk of their roof. Yep, go ahead, Tom.
Jeff, it turns out that that site is on a different substation. That's
okay.
on the Shelburne substation. We're on the Cumberland substation.
Okay, excellent.
No problem.
All right,
No problem.
that's good. That's good.
That
Problem solved.
project is actually bigger than the 200 kilowatts that Tom mentioned.
Great. Okay.
So,
Well, I'm glad it's on a different line then.
and full disclosure, my son at Resonant Energy is doing that project.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear they're doing it, but but I was worried that that was going to be on the same feeder line. So, okay, well, that's good. Yeah, on the other subjects, let's see. Well, I'm kind of in agreement that we need to do the behind the meter type technique of which basically means build the electrical service first and then and install the meter first and then do the rest. I think that'll actually be the most profitable way, but we should look into it both ways. If we're going to do that, the quicker we can get going on that building the meter, because it takes Eversource a while to make that actual connection to the meter. So we also need to get that moving as soon as we can, just to let them know that we're even going to be doing it and things, because they're not speedy at hooking that up. And then that could hold up everything else until we have that connected. And on the IRS payments, maybe John knows maybe a little bit of this, but I believe, like Andrew threw out the idea that maybe we could use part of the building, and I don't think you could use the whole building, but because we're using half the roof, I think we could probably use 50% of the building costs possibly. So, I mean, that would be definitely worth talking to a tax person to see whether or not that would work. I think when John did part of his roof, he was able to get the IRS to agree to using part of the roof costs as factored in. And so I don't know, it's definitely, that was an intriguing, I hadn't thought about that approach at all. And I like that idea. I doubt you'd get the whole building, but I think you might be able to get a fraction, you know, a percentage of 30% of half of the building or something. So,
Well, Jeff, just as a point of clarification there, I think given that we are not restricted to 25 kilowatts, we can use the whole roof with this project.
well, it's just that the half the roof is north facing, so I don't know.
Oh,
if you
I
really-
see what you mean. I got you. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
so the backside of it, I
yes,
don't know.
right. I get you. And I think that what you're saying makes sense because the cost of the pole barn is actually in excess of the cost of the solar project. And so
Right.
it might look disproportionate if we claimed the entire
Right.
cost of the pole barn for that size solar project.
Right, but I think it's legit to look at some portion of it, you know, or something that's
Yeah.
comparable to, you know, John's got his hand up, go for it.
Go ahead, John.
So I have only done scratch the surface type research, but there are several issues that need to be addressed through the RFP. And I think writing a broad type RFP is very helpful from that perspective. One is that and then in your note, you were asking about single phase or three phase. Right now, the expansion above 15 kW for single phase has not been approved by the state legislature or the Department of Public Utilities. It is proposed and it may or may not happen. Three phase allows us to go up to 25 kW without an expansion, according to the person I spoke with today, who is also in the business. So I'm just saying that needs to be clarified as to what the current maximum allotment is under today's legislation. So to me, that should be built into how the RFP is written. I think
What should be built into how the RFP is written?
whether we should, what the maximum amount we could put in under single phase and what we can put in under three phase.
Oh, to have the proponents clarify that for us.
Yes, I think
Okay.
that that's what part of the RFP is meant to do. That
I
you
think that's
ask them to-
fine.
I think you ask them to provide what the best case scenario is. As far as the federal tax credits, nobody in the state has actually done this yet, and it's brand new legislation on the federal level. So my understanding from my research is that we will have to apply for a specific tax number that would equate specifically to this project. And then we can claim the 30% federal tax credit, which would come back to the town in the form of an actual rebate. As opposed to, since we don't pay taxes, we would get 30,000 or 30% of whatever the final cost is. So I think from your part of you were saying, should we hire a third party company to manage all this? My initial reaction was this, well, I think that's part of what I would think that the role of the Energy Committee would be, is to do that research. And using somebody like FERCog to actually put together the RFP with the guidance from both the Select Board and the Energy Committee would cover the type of questions that you're concerned about. We do need to, in the RFP, state whether we are going single phase or three phase. So that would be an area that would need some more research from that perspective, as well as what the current limits are. But I agree with everything else you said. I mean, there are definitely benefits. I question whether or not, I mean, the original proposal, I think the solar on the pole barn was a secondary thought, because Mark came forward saying, I need a pole barn. And we said, well, if we're going to put a pole barn in, let's put the solar on it too. So using that excuse that we can apply for the total cost, I think, not excuse, but using that as a rationalization may be walking a fine line, and I think we should be careful with that. So that's just how I felt about looking at those questions.
I think those are useful guideposts, John. I think I agree with you on the sequence of discussion of how the pole barn came into being and how the solar came into being, but the other side of that coin is that by the time that discussion was concluded, there were 2 warrant articles for those 2 pieces on the town meeting warrant. And the town voters voted on them both at the same meeting.
Under different warrant articles.
Right, but it was, you know, put
Understood.
forward as
Yeah.
these are 2 halves of a project
Absolutely,
here.
absolutely.
know.
And I'm just pointing out what I think are the priorities, which is identifying single phase versus 3-phase and
Yep.
identifying what the actual capacity, maximum capacity is under both those things. Because if you go to a certain level, then the actual incentives do go down because there's another if, and I can't remember the term, I have it written down someplace, but the SMART program only offers like 2 cents on the dollar or something for incentives. So there may be another way of making sure we get more money and allocate those excess KWH to other town accounts. And we want to make sure that whoever is awarded the bid understands what those mechanisms are and include that in the RFP to make sure that they can clarify that for the committees to review.
I agree with you fully, John, that the proponents should give us the optimal approach. Give, you know, in both incentives and tax credit, direct payments, et cetera, and all the rest of it. But just so you know, I have consulted 2 different solar providers, Select and Resonant, and both of them have told me that municipalities can exceed 25 kW and still be eligible for net metering.
I don't just, I'm sure they said that. I would like to see that in writing on some form.
I agree with you. I want it in writing too.
Would hate to go down that road and then turn around and say, oh, no, you only qualify for the 10% or 15%, whatever.
Right. So,
But the
and
maximum,
just,
I mean, I'm sorry, my last thought is, we applied was for 27 kW, I think, on the barn. So we're kind of limited to maximizing that production on that size system. Either way, we want to make sure that when the rules change, according to my source, we can expand that system to the full 25 or 60 is what I was told may be potential in the near future, but it's not on the books yet. So even if we had to go with a slightly lower system temporarily, we could expand the system further down the road, which is why looking at single phase versus 3-phase would be imperative during the RFP process, in my opinion.
yes, sounds good. It just, my sources have told me that 27 to 28 is the maximum of what you can get on that roof.
But I don't know if Tom, did you happen, when you were speaking with the gentleman from Eversource, did he mention what the maximum capacity is for any single or 3-phase?
No,
I'm talking about what would fit on that 20 by 80 roof, John.
Well, that's the maximum is 27 would fit, but
Right.
in the conversation with Eversource, that would be one of the questions for their representative to clarify what the actual maximum is.
Well, John, I had a question, and that is, why would you even think about going single phase? Why not go 3-phase?
Cost,
Since it's right there.
cost, you're going to pay significantly more for 3-phase inverters.
In terms of hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars or?
Thousands of dollars.
I see. Okay. And the tax number that you mentioned that we would have to establish for this project, could this be a tax number that would apply to any future solar projects as well?
No, just this particular project.
Just this
Per
particular?
project. And somebody suggested that somebody contacted the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, since no town in the state has even attempted to do this yet. and get some guidance from their perspective as to what they see is going to be required.
Yeah. And then my comment is you were suggesting that the Energy Committee do the research to figure out what all the various possibilities are for incentive rebates. And when I spoke with Matt Sokovich at Eversource, he strongly encouraged that we hire a company that is very, has a lot of experience in solar installations and the various grant potential, grant source potential. And he said it's a complicated situation between the feds and the state, and that I would say that we on the Energy Committee are in a position to be promoting hiring a company that really knows how all the details of solar installations, but that we are not the ones that are in a position to make the final recommendations. Yeah,
I understand. My only concern is that's another cost that will come out of whatever the town has set aside for the money to install the solar system, and that the amount of time that will be delayed, especially if we're talking about only a 200 kW capacity on that substation, that could be taken up if it's all based on who applies first. So until we get an application, and we may not get this in if somebody else comes in on that substation and wants to go with a larger system.
you know, I would guess that the RFP that we are talking about sending out, it could be designed in such a way that we get the kind of company that Matt Sokovich is recommending. And that would hold us
So,
back.
John, that is the question that's on the table now. I think there are three possibilities here. One is, as you recommended, that the Energy Committee take this on as a volunteer project. Tom is saying they don't think the Energy Committee is able or wants to do that. The second possibility is to write into the RFP that the successful bidder will take on that project of applying for the federal direct payment to municipalities, you know, in lieu of tax credit for the 30%. And the third possibility is to not put that into an RFP if we're doubtful that the installer company we want to hire will take that on, and instead bid that separately to get a consulting contract to do that.
I agree, and my view is that we should go with your second option. That should all be built into the RFP, and when you're evaluating who to award the bid to, you base the scoring on who's capable of providing those services.
Okay. And are you confident that there are installer companies out there that will take that piece on?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
And
Well,
I don't think
I'm certainly
ours-
happy to go down that road, the RFP road, if we want to give that a try. And my only thought on that is that we might want to carve that out as some kind of, you know, add alternate or something, that so that if it turns out that the bidders don't want to bid on that we still might have a successful bid, even if that bidder doesn't take that on.
Agreed. And I'd be willing to help review the wording of the RFP. And whoever you decide to have issue the RFP, I'm willing to volunteer my time to help write the specs so that we're covered on those items.
And just as a point of information, John, you're correct that this is all pretty new territory. It's stuff that we will do on the back end of the project. So it's, from a timing perspective, the 30% credit thing isn't going to hold us up in
Correct. I don't mean
proceeding
it that way.
forward.
Right. We have
And
12 to 18 months to apply for the
Right. And the other point of information is that the town of Buckland is already going down this road.
Oh, so we already have somebody to help us.
Well,
Sort
no,
out the
but
weeds.
that would depend on your contacting the town of Buckland, of which I cannot say more about that. Because as I have fully disclosed already in my memo, that's my son's company that's working for the town of Buckland.
Oh,
But anyway, so the other questions that I had in the, and so I think, go ahead, Rick.
Carrie's had her hand up multiple times. I'd
Oh,
like to
I'm
hear
sorry,
what she-
Terry, I've missed you.
That's okay. Mark Shibby's on the line, and he's waiting to bring electricity to the pole barn. The specifications for the pole barn was for 3-phase, knowing that solar was going on the roof. And he's just kind of at a standstill. So Mark, take it away.
Mark,
Yeah,
question for you. Do you have other needs for 3-phase power in your operations?
Not immediately, but trying to think down the line if we ever wanted to put I know we had to get a different air compressor when we went over to 3-phase with the first solar system. So if I wanted to put an air compressor over there, and or thinking down the line, electric vehicles, if you want to have a charger. I don't speak electricity, so these are just some thoughts I'm throwing out there. I reached out to one electrician, told him 3-phase, and then I heard about, well, we might go single phase. So until I get an answer, I don't have any more quotes, but that's what I'm looking for.
So from your perspective, we would be looking to bring power there anyway, but we would want to bring the right kind of power to be able to put an inverter there with whatever outlets you would want for your operations. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And John, do you have any thoughts on the 3-phase question there as Mark is laying it out here?
my feeling is since 3-phase already at the pole, that we should just go ahead, bite the bullet and put 3-phase in at the barn. Especially with Massachusetts 2015 goals of more electrification. We probably in the next 10 to 15 years want to be starting looking at more electric vehicles and town-owned vehicles. So I would suggest that we go down the 3-phase route.
Rick?
I agree 100%. I would not like to see this project held up. There's no reason not to get electricity into that building. So we know it was spec'd for 3-phase. Electricians are all recommending 3-phase for the program. You guys are talking about 3-phase for the solar. Why would we dub around and put this off? Why don't we just deal with it and vote tonight to get Mark to go ahead and put 3-phase service in, as I think it was John mentioned, or maybe it was Jeff. You don't just call them and they come tomorrow. Let's get this thing going, for goodness sakes.
Well,
kiss it.
I'm in agreement with you, Rick and John, that and Mark, that 3-phase is the way to go. The only additional piece to that, Rick, is that if we want to do a behind the meter project, which I think I would recommend, as Jeff is also recommending there, that we would not just be bringing 3-phase power to the pole barn, we would also be installing an inverter now. That's my understanding, right? No?
No. No, sorry, am I on mute?
Oh, we're just bringing 3-phase power to the building now.
Yeah.
In order to go
installation and
behind the meter. I thought we needed a meter there in order to go behind the meter.
When they put the panel in, they will put a meter in. The only difference is when we commission the solar, they will change out the meter for a net meter. So you're
Okay,
gonna end up with a commercial meter on that building.
okay,
And then when the system is installed, they'll come back and replace the meter.
Thank you for clarifying that. So that's what I think we should do, is put the service, the three-phase service in now with a meter, so that we can RFP the project as a behind the meter project.
And you,
So-
I'll just add, you do have to have an electric account before you can even apply for interconnection. So delaying any longer is just going to delay the project longer from that perspective. You can't file an interconnection without an account number.
Right, right.
Does that need to
So-
come to a, or is that just something that, because it's already in the specs, something that we can just give Mark the permission to go ahead with? Do we need to vote, or can Mark just be said or told?
Terry,
go?
do you want a motion on this?
It's part of the pole barn project, so unless Mark gets multiple quotes that he wants the board to vote on, there's no action needed tonight. Mark can just pursue getting an electrician to the site.
Okay. So it sounds like we were on the path to doing a behind the meter project anyway, if we had already spec'd this in. Is that's correct? Yes, John?
You're muted,
I don't know. I wasn't involved in that process, but I assume that sounds like that's what you've done.
Yeah. Okay. No, I just wanted to clarify that, because the question arose whether we were going in front of the meter or behind the meter, but if we've already spec'd a meter in our pole barn proposal, then we're going behind the meter, because we will have one by the time we do the installation. And just from a timing point of view, from my perspective, Mark can go ahead with this electrical project while we get the RFP out the door. So I don't see that as holding us up in any way.
No, I'm just saying if that account isn't established by the time the RFP is awarded, the electrical account for putting in the service to the pole barn, that's step one in priority right now. Get that in.
Right.
And then whenever it's awarded, that person can file the interconnection agreement and things will continue to move.
Right.
If that's not done now, then it's going to delay that from that perspective.
Yeah. No, understood. Was there any other were there any other issues that you had in terms of items you wanted to see go into the RFP? And have we addressed the items, the 6 items that I raised in my memo adequately here?
From my perspective, I think what you have brought up are the things that need to be incorporated into the RFP. And that could be worded in such a way that it's, here's the background, here's what we're looking for, and then the evaluation criteria can be set up based on how much knowledge these people bring from that, from those questions.
Okay. Rick, other thoughts on your part?
No, I think it's good to get going, and I think that the RFP shouldn't be cut and dry to eliminate us getting as much feedback and quote as possible. If we put in something that says, well, you're going to be required to do the IRS tax thing that doesn't even exist yet, I mean, that's silly. So we don't want to put that stuff in it. We want to just say, we would like help on all those things, find out what their capabilities are, but not make it a condition of putting in and it's not a bid, a proposal. So I'd just like to see more companies open to give us as much information as we can get.
Well, that's why I was
Yes,
suggesting we kind of carve that out in such a way that we can ask for it, but not require it.
Exactly. That's the way
Yeah.
you stated it previously, and I'd like to
Yeah,
make sure that it's up that way too.
yeah.
And the
Tom? Oh.
tax credit is not proposed, it is actual. So it's just
Right.
that nobody's been through it yet. So that's the, canary in the coal mine, if you will, that it's going to take a little time and knowledge to
Right.
understand how to go through that process.
Yes, lots of people have been through the 30% tax credit, like I've done that for my own house. And so has John and Jeff and lots of other people. The new part is getting a direct payment refund on a 30% credit for a municipality that doesn't owe taxes. So there's a whole different form that they have to create so that the IRS can process that. So it's essentially, they've essentially taken the 30% residential commercial credit and allowed municipalities to benefit from that same credit, even though they don't owe taxes. So that's the new wrinkle. Tom.
And the point I was going to make follows right along with what you just said, Andrew, and that is to the extent possible, if we can get a company to propose that has a lot of experience with municipalities, that would be of great benefit.
Yeah.
But
No,
I
I
would
think
just suggest, Tom, that would be part of the scoring when you
Yeah.
get these proposals. And
Yeah.
that you weight the scoring based on their experience.
Right. Yeah, and basically with these kinds of things that I've seen before, when we went out for the Solarize proposal, that Jeff and John were part of that committee that reviewed those, and we had some help with that we designed the scoring rubric as, most advantageous, less advantageous, and not advantageous. And you basically just sort of lay out the criteria there of what you consider to be most, less, and non, as a way of scoring the different proposals that you receive. Since that's all a public and transparent process that you have to be able to show to the bidders should they question your choices. Terry, do you feel like you have what you need to move forward with FERCog on moving this RFP ahead?
I can certainly reach out to the FERCog, give them your notes, but I'm certainly not a solar expert.
No, and neither are they, by their own admission.
That is correct.
So I think we're still in the process of iterating this forward, but I think with the Energy Committee and John engaged in this, hopefully you all will be on hand to review their next draft. Does that sound like a good way to proceed?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Should John take a peek at what Terry's going to send to COG
I'd be
So that
glad
the
to help
first draft-
Terry.
so that the first draft comes out further ahead and stop?
Sure.
Everything takes longer. If you
Yeah,
just, what, you want some things up front, put it in, just
yeah.
Right.
not wait for
I'd be
the
glad
first
to-
draft.
be
That'd be
glad to-
great.
My understanding, Terry, is that we have a first draft already. You and I reviewed some preliminary language that Andrea put together along with a model RFP from another community. So we're not starting from zero. We have some language that we've looked at already. Is that correct, Terry?
That is correct. It
Yeah.
would just be like me trying to change a transmission in a Mack truck. I will
Right.
cut and paste between the documents, but whether it makes sense,
Right. No, I think that if we can take what they've given us already, add in the notes from this meeting, and let the Energy Committee and John review the next draft. Hopefully we'll get there. It might take a few meetings, but we'll get there. Does that sound like a good place to leave this? Do you need any formal motions from us, Terry, to move this ahead?
nope.
Okay, good.
Terry,
Well-
right now, our Energy Committee is scheduled to meet on the 18th of the month. If there were a draft available by the 18th, we could certainly put that on the agenda.
Okay, I can't guarantee that because I'm
Sure.
trying to get budget sheets out to departments at the moment, but
Yeah.
I will make a note of that.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you all for turning your attention to this issue and for your willingness to help us move it out the door. And I
Wow.
think we made good progress tonight.
It's a great project. Thanks for pushing it. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and thanks for asking those questions.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was a really nice write-up, Andrew, that you did ahead. That helped a lot to
Great.
focus everything.
Thank you. Good. All right. So onward. We're down to John Walsh, stay with us. Interim Cal Gym Director through June 30, 2024. Do you want to say more about that, John?
Well, sure. Having spent so much time there and since last May coordinating with the contractors for the heating system, I feel like I've become very attached to the building. So knowing that Bill Buck is not there any longer, I feel like from my experience managing programs with the utility, my background in teaching those type things, that I would be willing to act as an interim, knowing that no one from the actual committee is able to act as an interim director if they're on the committee. So I am willing to explore that until somebody may come forward to apply for the permanent position. If a candidate isn't found between now and the end of the fiscal year, I would consider looking into it at a more permanent basis. I do have some clarification questions that I want to ask at some point before actually accepting the position, specifically around processes and communication between the select board and the rec committee, who designates areas in the basement for usage, who has the first say, who has the last say, who makes a recommendation, those type things. I'd like to know what the budgets are for maintenance, those type things, because I have already submitted a budget, not a budget, but a list of items that I think need to be addressed in the short term, not just in the long term. And I want to know whether or not the select board and finance committee, if you will, are willing to move those forward, because the building itself is starting to look decrepit. And it bothers me to see a building like that we potentially want to get more use in, looking in that state. So those are the type of things I would at some point want to clarify. I understand that Norm Beebe, I received an email from him saying that they would like to meet with me this week, and then make their recommendation back to the select board to hire or not hire. Unfortunately, Jeff and I are on our way to Providence, Rhode Island tomorrow for storm work, so I will not be available for that meeting. I did speak briefly with Norm, and I guess part of it may be you guys make your decision and then defer it to the final conversation with the rec committee as to whether or not they would like me to act in that capacity.
So you're just telling us that you're interested and potentially available to be the interim and possibly beyond that, and that you still have a lot of questions and the rec committee hasn't yet made a recommendation of their own. So we're just kind of hearing your interest at this point. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And Terry, do you have any light to shed on some of the questions that John raised about process and that sort of thing?
I told both John and Norm that if the rec committee recommends John and the board appoints him, that I think we should have a meeting with the rec committee, John, and the select board, or at least a representative, to iron out some of those things, because there's just been a lot of miscommunications, perhaps. I received emails almost daily about problems at Cowell Gym that I'm troubleshooting, and it could come from any member of the rec committee or the chair of the rec committee. And there just needs to be a better streamlined process.
I'm in complete agreement, and having just a second, Rick, and just having taken that impromptu tour today, I got, you know, another perspective from a different member of the rec committee. We got an email from Mary Lou Gallup with all of her recommendations, and then saying that she was taking a 3-month leave of absence. And, you know, so yes, I think a joint meeting would be very helpful. In addition, there are several groups. The Holiday Lights group has a lot of equipment down there that could be better stored. Joe Judd has elections commitment equipment that could certainly be better stored. The Emergency Management Committee has equipment down there that needs to be stored in a different place. And there's a new enterprise that Diana is developing, which is a ping pong room that can work better if some of that equipment from all three of those groups is stored more effectively. Will create more space for recreational activities. I was pleased, you know, just following on what John said, that the basement is well heated now, and those mini splits, you know, are a great asset in terms of making the basement more functional. So that was a real plus in my view. But I second the idea, Terry, of having a joint meeting to straighten things out, because there's a lot of different folks strewing stuff around up there that could be cleaned up, in my view. Rick.
Yeah, all great points for sure. John, my question is, you said before you accepted, you would want answers to some of these things about budget, et cetera. So does that mean, well, also let me then, the other avenue was that the meeting Wednesday night of the rec committee, you won't be available for, you've spoken to them. Previously, we have made a motion to appoint someone to a position pending the approval of the committee. We could do that, but are you not ready for that yet, is my question.
No, I'm fine with doing that, Rick. I think from my perspective, this is exactly what I would like to have clarified, is a meeting of all parties and defining roles, because when I was at the utility, there was a very clear structure of who goes to who. I only, as far as budget type things, I'm just curious what my role would be in recommending those type of improvements. So I don't know what the budget is at all, whether there's a repair budget, a maintenance budget, capital budget. And I think that's part of what you're going into now, is the budget cycle and what needs to be set aside. But I would like to, in that position, would be advocating for the things that I think are essential for this current or next fiscal year. But I think having that avenue of communication is my biggest concern. And if we can establish something as someone from your board becomes a liaison like you do with other rec committees or other, since this is a town appointed position, I think it would at least be conducive to have somebody other than Terry being the main person to run things past, since she's already so overwhelmed with everything. So I would accept a pending type of an appointment.
Then I would like to go ahead and move that, if it's okay. I would like to move that we appoint John Walsh to the position of, it's called Director of the Cowell Gym.
Interim Director.
I'm sorry, Interim Director. Thank you very much, of the Cowell Gym, pending concurrence with the Rec Commission at their meeting this week.
I'll second that motion. Is there further discussion on that? And hearing none. Terry, does this seem like we're not putting any carts before any horses here? We can do this without getting the rec committee going?
As long as it's pending the rec committee's recommendation, I don't see a problem.
Okay. And John, just as a note on what you're suggesting, I think you're heading down the right path. My understanding in terms of operating, maintenance, and capital budgets is that other groups, like the library, for example, the director will make those recommendations to their board and then come to the select board during the budget process to review those proposals with the select board, before they go on the warrant.
Correct, yeah.
So that's
what I just wanna
what I
make
would be
sure.
looking for from you and the rec committee in
Right.
regard to the Cal Gym.
Right. There are items there, like, there's stuff stored from the 1930s up in the attic that I think somebody should bring a dumpster up there
Right.
and start cleaning that place up, because it's not necessary to have all that stuff there. So,
Yeah.
why don't we create a volunteer day to have people come in and help clean out underneath the bleachers, that type
Yeah.
of stuff. So those are the type things, like some of it can be done for free, but others has to have time, and especially custodial work, because Paul's going there one day a week. But now coming into winter, we're starting to see more cleaning needed in the lobbies and then outside of that stuff. So that's the stuff I want to make sure is addressed.
Good. All righty. Well, the motion's been made and seconded. If there's no further discussion, we'll bring to a vote. All in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and the motion carries. And John, you were conditionally appointed.
Thank you for.
Well, my partner might suggest that I'm out of my mind for going down this road, but thank you for putting your trust in me.
All righty. Well, thank you for stepping forward. Great. So we are now on to D, which is FY21 CDBG contract amendments for GCG Engineering and Breezeway Farm, extending contracts from December 31, 2023 to June 30th, 2024. Rick, have you had a chance to review that?
I have. They seem straightforward, and I have no further discussion before we act on them. Do you?
Okay. I do not. Do you want to move that?
Yes, sir. I move to extend the contract with GCG Associates to manage Shelburne's Bridge Street Phase 2 project to June 30th, 2024, and to authorize the chair or his designee to sign the extension.
And I will second that. And did we miss anything, Terry, or we got the whole thing?
That's one motion, and then there's a second motion to extend the contract for Breezeway Farm.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion, we'll vote on that first one. Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and we're on to the second motion.
And I would move to extend the contract with Breezeway Farm Consulting to manage Shelburne's fiscal year 21 community development block grant to June 30th, 2024, and to authorize the chair or his designee to sign the extension.
And I will second. If there's no further discussion, we will vote. Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and we have passed those two motions. Joe Judd requests to appoint election workers for 2024. Rick, have you had a chance to review his list?
I have. I have no concerns.
Okay, do you want to move that?
Move it as,
I think it's a motion
Later.
to appoint that slate of election workers.
and I would move to appoint the slate of election 2024 Town of Shelburne election workers as presented in the document of January 4th from Joe Judd, the town clerk.
And I will second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and we have appointed the election workers. Joe Judd is requesting a vote to allow early in-person voting. Terry, any info on that we need to be aware of?
No, it's pretty standard. There is a motion in the fourth paragraph that Joe is seeking as part one of his request.
Rick, are you ready to move that, or do you have discussion on that?
No, I've reviewed it, pondered it. I think it sounds like we're just meeting the state laid out process and keeping our ducks in a row on this subject. So I would move that we approve the request of the town clerk, the chief elections official for the town of Shelburne, to hold early in-person weekday voting for the March 5th, 2024 presidential primary election on Monday, February 26th of 2024, on Tuesday, February 27th, and on Thursday, February 29th of 2024, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. each day for a total of 12 hours for the week.
And I will second that. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and that motion carries. We're on to any other business. Do we have any other business, Terry?
Before we move on, there is a two-part to Joe's request.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed something.
He's recommending that the town offer early voting by mail for the annual town election. He feels by doing so, it would avoid confusion to voters. And it would be in the best interest to offer early voting for all elections in 2024. He says if the board agrees with his recommendation, that no further action is necessary.
Okay,
Aye.
and does agreeing just saying I agree, or does he want a motion to that effect?
Agreeing is just agreeing.
Okay, I have no objection to that. Rick, do you?
I agree.
All right, we did that.
Thank you. I do have two items under other business. One is Kay Cafaso's request to do soil testing at the Pocket Park site for a total of $75 plus shipping. She thinks it would be approximately $120.
I have no objection to that. It seems like we even though I think it is, anticipating a project which we have not yet identified a funding source for. I think it's a prudent thing to get done, since we want to know where we can plant stuff in the future. And it being a pretty incidental cost, I don't see that being a problem. But Rick, your thoughts on that?
I had only printed off one of the emails, and Terry, you may recall, the 120 is the 3 samples at 25 plus shipping. And then there was a figure of her time for 3/4 of an hour or something. Was that included in the 120?
Yes, yeah, it was the samples, shipping, and $37 for her time for a total of $120.
Yeah, she was hoping to get this before the ground froze. I think we missed that. So, best of luck to her, but I think this is something we should approve moving forward with.
All right, do you want to move that, Rick?
I would move that we authorize Kay Cafaso to proceed with the soil samples at the Pocket Park to the tune of $120.
And I will second that. And if there's no further discussion, we'll vote. Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and we're on with that. And perhaps with all this rain we're supposed to get, the ground will thaw back right out again, but who
Maybe
knows?
next week.
That's right. Good. Terry, did we have something else?
Yes, Mark Shippey is recommending the appointment of James Bragdon of Old Greenfield Road to be hired as a part-time winter plow truck driver. He'd be filling a vacancy left by one of their longtime winter help drivers' resignation that recently occurred. So Jim would just be called in during storms as a part-time employee.
And just as point of information, I trust Mark and would be happy to accept his recommendation. I'm just curious whether there's any sorts of hoops that those part-timers need to jump through in terms of licensing or ability to drive our equipment and all that sort of thing.
Yes, they would have to have the proper CDL licensing. Jim is already a part-time employee of the town as animal inspector, so he's been somewhat vetted, but we would require copies of all the licenses before he'd be put behind a wheel of a CDL required piece of equipment.
So if we were to approve him tonight, it would be pending his paperwork then, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Rick, your thoughts?
I'm in favor of authorizing that. If it's just again, an approval verbally to yes, go ahead and proceed. I'm good with that. If it needs a motion, I'll be glad to offer it.
I would need a
I
motion.
think we need a motion because he's going to become a part-time plow driver.
I would move that we accept the recommendation from Mark Shippey to hire James Bragdon as a part-time winter plow driver. I think that's all I need to say, right?
Just
Oh,
in
I'm
adding pending the paperwork, yeah.
Pending the appropriate vetting of licenses and paperwork.
Great, and I will second that. And any further discussion? And hearing none, we'll vote. Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and we have appointed James Bragdon as a part-time plow driver. Anything else, Terry?
That's all I have.
All right, and our next meeting
Andrew,
is, sorry.
if I could throw one thing out.
Yep,
I just wanted to do a really quick update on the streetlight committee. And we're
thank you.
we've now pretty much completed the survey of the lights in town, although we're kind of discussing some individual lights and things. Once we finish that, we'd kind of like to bring that forward to the select board to just make a decision. I mean, it's kind of outside of our purview as to which lights we should really be, we're going to make a suggestion as to which light should be added, which one should be deleted. We can't really delete anything unless you go through a regular formal hearing, but we'd at least like a decision on some of the lights that are questionable, like ones that might be owned by the church or things like that. So that will be forthcoming, but hopefully once John and I get back from our travels, we'll wrap that up a little bit. And our next meeting is January 19th at 10 a.m. We're hoping to meet with Real Term Energy. I'm still waiting to hear from them. They just came back from Christmas break yesterday. So I haven't heard yet from when we can meet with them, but that's our next thing, is just to try and hash out where we are on our agenda. And that's really pretty much the main thing. So we'll be having another meeting coming up.
So it sounds like if you're meeting the 19th, you won't have new things to tell us until our following meeting, because we're meeting on the 17th.
Right. We tend to
Okay.
follow you guys by just a tad. So that's why I figured
Okay.
I should at least throw you, let you know that we're at least working on things, even though we won't necessarily have it until a few days after you are. But
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
the lights is really, we just need to hammer down exactly how many lights we have eventually. So you guys don't have to rush into, deciding on the streetlight stuff, but we would at least like you to be thinking about it so that, in the next month or so, if you could make a decision on some of those lights, and it'll be pretty straightforward. I have a nice map now that can take you straight to it. I'm happy to drive each of the select board members around if you'd like, and show you where the controversies are or anything like that. So we'll work it out. I'm not
Great.
too worried. But
And while you're here, Jeff,
Yep.
and with your other hat on the Energy Committee, has the Energy Committee finalized your process and recommendations for hiring a replacement for Cynthia on the,
Yes.
and has that been approved by the select board?
That's a good question. Let me ask Cynthia.
I don't think, I don't think it has.
He says yes, it has.
Did we vote on that, Terry?
Yes.
Okay, I just couldn't remember whether
Cindy
we.
Fan is the,
Okay,
That's
so I just want to make sure we cross that T
Yep.
there.
yeah,
Okay.
we're all set.
Okay, great. Very good.
Andrew, I have one quick correction. According to the minutes, our meeting is the 22nd and the 29th. I had it incorrectly listed as the 17th.
Oh, so our next meeting is the 22nd then. Oh, and the 29th. So Jeff, you would have two opportunities to update us there.
Okay, if you could put me on the agenda for that one, I will give you a better
Okay, and if you're not ready, there's the one following, because we got sort of tangled up with the Martin Luther King holiday, and so
Yep.
we're kind of trying to get back on our regular schedule there.
Yeah, well, our biggest thing is just getting Real Term to sit down with us and meet with us as a committee too, which is tricky. So, but once I get that, then and I think that'll happen very soon. So I think I can make the 22nd or 29th, either one.
Okay, sounds good.
Right. Great.
If there's any other business, we'll go to any other correspondence, Terry?
None.
Okay. Is there public comment? I hear I hear a great silence here, so we'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thank
And
you
we'll
all.
everybody.
see you on January 22nd.